The Sony a7IV. I'm not gonna lie and say this camera was my first choice. I had my eyes set on another camera, but with the quality you get at this price point, it was hard not to consider and go for it. I'd rather talk more about the process of filmmaking and cinematography than gear, but seeing as how this camera drastically changed the work I've created, I had to make a long-term review for you fellow filmmakers that might be considering the a7IV. In the end, from using it over the past year, I can truly say it sure has been worth the purchase. Okay, remember everything in this video is my opinion. It's okay if you don't share the same thoughts on this camera, and everyone should make their own judgment on gear when you're the one spending your money on it. If you want to see more of what I've created with the Sony a7IV to see for yourself if the camera is worth picking up, the videos on my channel from the past year have all been shot with this camera, including short films, since March of 2022. I'll quickly say on the photo side of this camera, I have nothing bad to say about it. It takes great photos. If I miss the shot, it will most likely be user error, and rarely is it the actual camera. Cameras coming out now aren't bad at taking photos. Now it just depends on what your needs are with what you're shooting. Whether you need a faster shot per second or better low light capabilities or other specific needs like that. Before this video, I want to talk more about the filmmaker side of using this camera, as that's mainly what I've been using it for now, and whether or not you might consider picking it up, maybe as your main camera or even a B camera. I'll first give you my opinion straight away on what I think you should do if you're thinking about getting this camera, and after you can stick around to hear the good and bad reasons I have on this camera. Also, these opinions are just looking at Sony cameras, as there are many great brands out there, but I don't have experience with them, so I won't be speaking on them. For hybrid shooters, this is a fantastic option for someone that wants both great photo and video in one body. If you're coming from the a7 III, I don't know about the photo side, but the video is a big jump in quality that I believe to be worth it. This camera makes it easy and simple for you to offer more to your clients and keeping it within one body. Now for those just on the filmmaking side, if you can afford the extra $1,400 to spend, I would highly recommend getting the FX3. But if you want to save that money, maybe use it to get a lens instead, and don't mind the cons of this camera that I will go over later, then this is a great option if you want a full frame camera that can still give you a cinema look from the footage. There are also some benefits you get with the Sony a7IV over the FX3 and a7S III that might convince you to pick it up. But if you don't care about getting a full frame camera, or you would prefer a crop sensor camera, I would highly recommend looking at the FX30 if your focus is mainly just video. Now there are many great things about this camera that I will talk about, but it's best to know the not so good things first about the a7IV, so you're not surprised when you find that there's something in this camera that you won't like. Some are not too bad, I believe, but they might be a deal breaker for you. So here are the cons. The worst con I believe to be in this camera is the rolling shutter. It looks like from the a7 III to the a7IV, they did not improve the rolling shutter at all. It really is noticeable when I'm filming in the subways in the city and other vehicles or objects that zoom past the camera. To me, the rolling shutter is unbearable at times, and it's really easy for me to notice it right away. I believe you can avoid some of it in the crop mode, but then your shot will be tighter than you'd like it to be, and you might not get the wide shot you want. Now for this next con, I'm split on it, and that's the crop in 60 frames per second. It is bad because in 60 frames per second, you can't use the full frame sensor, so you might be tighter in than you'd like to be. But if you're like me and don't really use 60 FPS in your work that often, this might not be that big of a deal, and it just might make you be a little more creative when you want to use it. And with it being in crop mode, you get that extra reach that you might need to get the shot you want, but on the other side of things, it won't be as wide as you would like it to be, so you know, that's why I'm kind of split on it. This next con might be for some of the more newer filmmakers out there, but for the file formats you would most likely want to shoot in, the file sizes are massive. And that also means you need to pick up the right SD cards if you want to shoot in these nicer formats, and those prices can really add up. And this goes for any high quality mirrorless camera or cinema camera, so it's not just a con for the a7IV, but it is worth mentioning. The XAVC SI 4K has the best quality, but the sizes are huge. And then if you opt for the XAVC HS 4K, the files are much smaller and you keep the high quality, but if you have an older computer like me that's chugging along, you will definitely need to create proxies, otherwise your computer won't last that long. Another con I've noticed is that the footage feels a little too digitally sharp in my opinion. The camera shoots in 4K at its highest codecs, but it is downsampling from a 7K sensor, so the footage will be sharper. It's not that bad of a con, as I'll usually shoot with a 1/4 black pro mist, or I can soften it up in post, but that is an extra step that I'll need to do so the footage doesn't feel or look too sharp. Now this next con might be something many of you won't notice, but I mentioned it before in my switching from Canon to Sony video, and that is the poor LCD screen that the a7 IV comes with. Now I prefer monitoring my exposure with the external monitor, but if I'm just going out in the city and running and gunning, I just want to use my LCD screen so I don't have to bulk up my setup that much. I want my LCD screen to still be useful, and I think this one is just enough, but I definitely think it could have been way better. It doesn't make sense to me how my first camera, the Canon EOS R that launched in 2018, has a better and bigger LCD screen than this camera, the Sony a7 IV that launched in 2021. Now sure, this one doesn't have to be bigger, but the quality difference is definitely noticeable, and I don't want to have to use an external monitor every time I want to film. But still, it's just enough I believe, and the benefits of this camera definitely outweigh these cons. One last thing to mention is overheating might still be an issue, but for me it hasn't been at all. This camera doesn't have a fan built in like the FX3, so it's not guaranteed that you will avoid it, but for me I really haven't ran into that issue at all, so I don't really see it as a con, at least personally for me. But I had to mention it just in case. Now those are all the cons that I can think of from using this camera over the past year. They're not too bad to deal with, some are more noticeable than others, but I definitely think the benefits outweigh the negatives with the Sony a7 IV. Now the pros. For the price, I believe the quality you get out of this camera is sensational. I'd say the footage is pretty close to their cinema line, which you know will cost thousands of dollars more. You get 422 10-bit files in S-Log3, which makes color grading super fun and can be easy and simple to do. And even though the con is the files are big, it gives you so much information. If you mess up when shooting, you have that flexibility to fix it in post if you don't have any other choice. By the way, if you want to learn how I color graded my footage, I created a whole guide on my channel that can help you if you're struggling, or just tips and tricks that I used that you can add to your workflow no matter the camera you use. Another great thing I really enjoy about this camera is the customizable buttons and the way you can set up your camera so you never really have to go digging into the menus when you need something. The only time I ever go into the menus is to change the file format or to change the aspect ratio outline. But since I created my own menus, I'm not actually digging into the menus to change something that I need. It's always the first menu that pops up. Also, another pro that I've noticed over my EOS R is the Gamma Display Assist that helps you when you're shooting in S-Log3 or even S-Log2. It's really useful when I'm just shooting with the LCD screen, and it's accurate unlike the EOS R, which is way more inaccurate than I wish it would have been. If you don't have an external monitor, always use the Gamma Display Assist on your LCD screen so you know what your footage is going to look like when you go to color. The next pro for this camera specifically that could benefit you over the FX3 or FX30 is the lens choices you have. Okay, not only do you have a great line of Sony lenses to choose from, you also have third-party lenses you can use that are cheaper and still has great quality. But on top of that, you can also use full frame and APS-C lenses with this camera. Maybe you started out with a crop sensor camera and you have a collection of APS-C lenses. Well, you can still use it on this camera as you start to transition into full frame lenses. You can still get 4K in the crop mode since the camera is downsampling from a 7K sensor, so you won't lose that quality. And it's still sharp enough too. But I will say on the photo side of things, I would just stick with using full frame lenses so you get the full quality and then you can just crop in later. So that's another pro right there for this camera, is being able to crop into the sensor and reach further than you possibly could just with a single lens. Now I only own the Sony f2.8 24-70 G Master lens, and sometimes if I want to reach further than I could at 70, I'll use the crop mode, which turns the 24-70 to a 24-105mm lens, and that is super useful. You don't get this on the FX3, A7S III, or the FX30 because of this camera having a 7K sensor. And the last pro that is probably obvious is that this is a hybrid camera. As you see in the video side of things, it's very high quality, except for the rolling shutter, but the photos are great as well. In my opinion, I don't believe you're sacrificing one or the other in this camera, and you're able to keep it within one camera body. I hope this video has helped you get closer to a decision on whether or not you go for the Sony a7 IV. It's not the perfect camera, but for the price, it's hard to beat, and I think the pros definitely outweigh the cons. This could also be a B camera for some of you as well, if you're looking to get a second camera body. But if you already own the Sony a7 IV, why not comment down below some things you've enjoyed about it that maybe I didn't mention. If you enjoyed the video, why not hit that like button and subscribe if you're new to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video. Peanut is the star.
Tim, are you gonna upload that video or am I gonna upload it? You can upload it.